Happy to see you all. Okay, so all right, you have the gallery. I'll have the gallery so I can see all of you. Okay, sweethearts. Here we go. 1 little hour. See if we can make the most of it. So we think we're going to be for 1 hour doing the essence of the job, trying to see, discussing how to do the actual job of being a Buddhist. This is a very interesting point because we get so confused, think, my God, what do you do as a Buddhist? Especially if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you get completely confused. It seems so complicated. I remember my first teaching from Lama Zopa, I didn't have a clue. I was just drowning in confusion. Where's the Buddhism? I'd say to myself, you know. So let's discuss. And being your own therapist sounds so cute, but it's utterly the truth, I tell you. So for 1 hour, let's just see if we can get a few tools, take a few tricks to put into our daily lives, you know. Why? So we can develop this outrageously marvelous potential that the Buddha has found, that all of us have. Maybe let's talk about that. So that on the other hand, we cut the distinction, the nonsense, the distinction between me and other, and we be of use to others. That's the idea. That's the plan. So, okay, I think that's something that I think if in our modern world, if we could have even an inkling of the potential that we've got, it would be incredible. But so what is it that prevents us from seeing we've got potential? And that's really the essence of the whole thing, you know? So on the one hand, Buddha's saying that the nature of our mind is pure. I mean, we can just spend the hour just on that one sentence. So the first mistake we make when we hear that is that kind of we've been pure once and we got naughty and now we're dirty, you know, and we've got to sort of get back to the purity. Well, no, technically it can't be that way. And this is just not trying to be too intellectual about it, but it's I remember yeah, I think in the Christian teachings they talk that way. That's okay. That's very interesting. I was a Catholic. So in the teachings that, you know, we were made by God. We were with a sort of like made in the likeness of God. I don't know the exact words they say, but it's somehow we lost the plot. Well, I mean, we talk about Adam and Eve. Okay, whatever words you want. I don't know how the more intellectual Christians talk about it. I don't know. But we were pure at some point, but we lost it. Now, technically, from the Buddhist point of view, that can't be possible. It can't be possible that if, in other words, pure, well, so what does pure mean? That's the word. It's a very simple word, but what does it mean here quite literally? Well, this gets us to look into the character of the mind as far as Buddha is concerned. So first of all, if you go to your, you know, if you hear that the mind, Buddha says the mind is naturally pure, and then you think, oh, that's interesting. Well, I'll go to my local neuroscientist. Can you please tell me the methods of how to get my mind to be naturally pure? They'd wonder what you're talking about because they're talking about the brain. And clearly the brain is a bunch of caca. We know that. It's not some pleasant thing. You wouldn't, I mean, you offer a plate of brains to somebody, we'd vomit. I mean, we used to eat them when I was a little girl. We were poor. We'd eat all the, you know, the livers and the stomachs and the brains of animals. But I mean, we don't think of it like that, isn't it? Because we think of it as this physical thing called the brain. So what does Buddha mean by it? Well, that gets us to understand what he means by the mind, which we know very well if we've heard even one Buddhist teaching. Is that the mind, consciousness is not physical. Consciousness is not a function of the brain. Consciousness is not the brain itself. Consciousness is not that. Consciousness is something that's not physical. So as soon as we say that, we get a bit kind of mystical because then we think about a soul or a spirit. Well, Buddha has no equivalent. He doesn't use that word at all. He uses the word mind or consciousness to cover everything. But his fundamental point, and this is really the essence of what Buddha has found. This is really the essence of, from Buddha's own direct experience, what he has found is possible. He's found, first of all, and this is coming from the Hindus, he didn't invent this, he's discovered this, and these Hindus before him had found this, from accessing their own mind at a subtler level, using this amazing technique that we know in the world as single-pointed concentration. By using that technique, these amazing Hindus before the Buddha, these genius yogis, they access these subtler levels of their own mind. So this is an experiential thing. It's not just some belief. You know, this is from the direct experience of the great yogis, that we have these subtler levels of consciousness that do not depend upon the brain. So when Buddha says the mind isn't the brain, he's not chucking the brain out, like, throwing it out with the baby with the bathwater. He's simply saying that there's a subtle level of our being that is not physical. That means it's not the object of our sensory consciousness, therefore not even something you can see through a microscope. It's literally in its character, not physical. So these yogis have found that. And this technique is available to anybody who wants to work hard. And from accomplishing this technique, you too will discover either of two things. One, there is no such thing as a consciousness that's subtler than the brain, in which case Buddha is mistaken. You say, thank you, Buddha, goodbye. Or you will agree with the Buddha and these previous Hindus that indeed there is a subtle level of your consciousness that doesn't depend upon the brain. This is the fundamental point. You've got to take this as your hypothesis to even understand most of Buddha's teachings. I mean, the idea of karma and reincarnation is ludicrous if we think of the mind being a brain. Clearly, it's nonsense. So we need to take this as the view, and this is something this is a lower level realization. The Buddha would say that we've had this in countless lives, this ability to access our subtle level of mind, this ability to have what they call shamatha, calm abiding, which is a level of what's called samadhi, single-pointed concentration. It's a technical thing. The techniques are all there for anybody who wants to do the work, And from this, you will discover directly, you will access directly your own consciousness at a more refined, subtle, powerful level. Very simply, very precisely. So what the Buddha is saying is, and we can even prove it there to some degree. It doesn't even need that to prove the Buddha's point. His essential point is that consciousness, mind, when we look into the psychological model of the mind, and we see the Buddha, as you've heard me talking all the time, so I ever talk about, he talks about how we have these three categories of states of mind. This chaos that seems to be, the seeming chaos in here, uncontrolled, berserk, uncontrolled thoughts constantly, which is what we think is natural. Therefore, you'd be weird if your mind wasn't like that. No, Buddha's dividing all of that seeming chaos into three categories. There are that part of, and they're all those emotions, they come down to being thoughts. At the subtle level, they are conceptual thoughts. And you can divide all these conceptual thoughts precisely into three categories. Those that are neurotic, I-based, fear-based, miserable, unhappy, misconceptions, delusional, afflictions, as they say in the literature, the Buddhist literature. Then you've got those that are reasonable and not attachment, anger, jealousy. There's three of the first lot. Then you've got the good stuff, the useful stuff, which is our saving grace, love and compassion and kindness and generosity, all these. And then you have the third category, I like to call them the mechanics, the part of our minds that everybody's got that causes us to function properly, ability to concentrate, ability to pay attention, ability to remember things. These are like mechanics. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous in their character. So what Buddha has found from his own experience, that the neurotic, deluded, miserable, unhappy, afflicted, delusional states of mind are not intrinsic to who we are. This is the fundamental point in the entirety of Buddha's teachings, all the way to the end, this is it. So that's what he means by the mind is naturally pure. That because they're not intrinsic to who we are, they're not integral to our nature, they're not necessary. They're adventitious, as they say in Buddhist psychology. Therefore, you can get rid of them. I mean, this is so shocking. If you go to, again, neuroscientists will think you're an insane person if you say that. Initially, it's true. And I'm so clear when you've heard this for the first time. I remember one woman in one class, she was shocked. And it's true. She said, don't be ridiculous. How can that be possible? Because that's a shocking concept. Why is it shocking? Because we take them as a given. We assume they're a natural part of a normal person. And what we mean by that is you'd be weird if you didn't have them. And that's exactly the point she made. And it's so clear. So this means we take as a given Anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, low self-esteem, misery, fear, to whatever degree, are normal parts of a normal person. This is why Buddha is so shocking in what he's saying, you know. And what he means by your mind is pure is that that stuff, no matter how long it has been there, it's not the main, it's not the core of your being. It doesn't define your true nature. These kinds of words. So virtues, speaking in a conventional sense, the virtues within us, the love and kindness and compassion and generosity, the good, the nice bits, the good qualities, they is what he's found are at the core of our being. You can't get rid of these. Hear this point, please. It's really fascinating. So even hearing this is a possibility. This is a model of the mind. If you went and studied psychology, as people do in the West, you do your 7 years, your 5 years, and you learn all these psychological models. You don't learn this one, I bet you. Well, I mean, you should. It's one of the first ones around. As the Dalai Lama said, it was more than 3,000 years ago. It was these amazing Indians who are the ones who began the investigation to the nature of self, not some smarty pants German called Freud or Jung. Nice fellows, nothing wrong with them. We think they invented all this. I mean, we're so arrogant, I tell you, in the Western world. So your conscious is not physical. Anger and depression and anxiety are not at the core of your being. I mean, and so so what means is your mind is actually pure means you can get rid of them. It's not as if you've had them before. If you'd gotten rid of them before, this is the point now, if you'd utterly rid your mind of these before, that is to say you've been pure once, then they could never come again. In other words, what they talk about, they use the analogy of seeds all the time. So when you've cut all the delusions, and of course, that's when you realize emptiness, when you've cut the root delusion, then if you've cut the root of something, how can it grow? It's not possible. Not possible. It's not possible. So what should give us courage and enthusiasm is this simple finding of the Buddha, which we first take as our hypothesis, which is the basis of all our practice. So this is rubbish inside us, which we know is there, which we know is the source of pain, that we can learn to first calm it down, get it to see more clearly, and eventually with practice, remove it altogether. That's it. That's being a Buddhist, babies. From here to Buddhahood. From here to eternity. That's being a Buddhist. I promise. It's just that it's a hard job. Don't hold your breath, okay? That's all. But it's encouraging. It's very encouraging. But this is the trouble. Even if we've been practicing 40 million years, you know, so long, when you wake up in the morning, you know, and the misery is there and the depression is there, or even a moment of it, even mildly, what happens? It overwhelms us. And then we assume this is me. We forget. It's sort of like one day the sun is, you know, the sky is all blue and clear. And next day it's all cloudy. You forget the sunny blue skies. Oh, it's all cloudy. So it feels like it's reality. And because we cling to everything as permanent, we assume it's permanent. We forget. So this is why one of the key practices, as Lama Zopa says, you know, it's bad enough when the anger or the depression overwhelms us. And the key thing is about seeing how it's a particular story it tells us. Anger is how everything's horrible. Depression is how everything's kind of hopeless. We believe it. That's bad enough, he said. We believe that that's true. But it's bad enough that we get caught up in the misery. But the worst thing is we believe it's true. And we believe it's permanent. So even remembering it's impermanent. Remembering, yeah, the clouds are there. The sky is full of depression today. Yep. But it ain't permanent, Robina. Even that is already powerful if we can remember. But because it's so overwhelming, the feeling is so overwhelming, or the jealousy, or the fears, or the anxiety are so compelling, so gripping, isn't it? We lose all common sense. So this is part of the skill of practice. You know, we sit down and do our mindfulness meditation, and of course because we can't stand the pain, we assume all the pain will go away. Well, it won't. It'll take a while. It will eventually, but not immediately. That's why we all get so depressed. And my God, my mind's getting worse. No, it's not. You're just seeing it more vividly. So what keeps us going is, even though it's overwhelming, and maybe you got some anger today that you can't believe, you still don't get completely overwhelmed by it. You navigate it. You know it's not permanent. You know it's not your true nature. You know it's there. You don't buy into it, but you learn to become more wise with it. And therefore, in other words, you learn to live with it, knowing it's impermanent, knowing it's not your real nature, not believing its story. And that is what weakens it and lessens it and changes it. And then next day, everything, the sky's blue again, you know. So it's not an easy job because we're so addicted to believing it, whatever's in front of us. Whatever's there, we see it as permanent for eternity. The mind is very concrete, you know. So, of course, it's sort of like if we don't learn this theory, how can you apply it? You have to learn the theories first. You have to learn the words first. You have to use these words to argue with your own pain and misery. But if you don't have the means, you just kind of get thrown from pillar to post. It's like if you don't know botany, you have no idea why there are flowers and why there are weeds, but you're hungry for the flowers and you can't stand the weeds. And one day the flowers pop up and you're all excited and you think it's permanent forever. Oh, phew, what a relief. Now I've got some flowers. But you don't know the causes of flowers. So you're going to grasp at it mightily. And then suddenly they die and the weeds take over again. You have a panic attack. Of course you will. So we rush from pillar to post, between up and down, up and down. Everything's delicious one day. We don't know why everything's delicious. The next day it's a nightmare. Then we panic. So when you understand the theory, then you have more courage. You know why the clouds are there today. You know why the weeds are overwhelming today, but you don't buy into it all. You become wiser, more skillful at navigating all the dramas. This is a really tough job, but this is the job of being a Buddhist, you know. I don't know. What do you think, people? Ask me some questions. What's happening for anybody? Any particular things that are coming up for you today or yesterday or this month? Talk to me. Anything on your mind? And the thing is, if you heard this for the first time, you practice what you can. If you've heard it for the thousandth time, you hear the same words, but we apply it according to our level, you know. Yes, Barbara. Hello there. I'm so happy to see you.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
I know that the mind impacts the brain. Does the brain impact the mind? I guess where I'm going is if one has a brain injury or develops Alzheimer's, those kinds of things, what does that do then to your mind?
I understand. Well, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, it's so utterly intimately connected, isn't it? That, you know, anything like you know, you're like, you know, you've got an eyeball, which is physical. And we have all the nerves and all the doctors can tell you, all the people who are good at this can tell you exactly all the bits and pieces. Well, the Buddha would actually add the extra component called consciousness. He'd say it's eye consciousness. It's part of your mind, which is not physical, that works intimately and inextricably with the eyeball and the nerves. So it's obvious you can't have, in other words, you can't have one without the other. So obviously if you've got, you know, whether it's the brain and your consciousness or your eyeball and your eye consciousness, it's exactly the same thing. If the physical part works well, then the consciousness has like a channel to flow through. But if the brain is all squashed and peculiar, then obviously the consciousness can't function properly. So you just have to get used to this way of using the words. You can't separate the brain from the grosser level of consciousness. You see, we've got gross consciousness, we've got subtle consciousness, and we've got very subtle consciousness. And these subtle levels of our conscious being, even just talking from the sutra point of view, these Hindus, when you've got single-pointed concentration, the deepest level of concentration, you'd look like you were dead. There'd be no movement of brain. There'd be no evidence of anything that's conscious, because consciousness itself is not physical, but the grosser levels clearly, obviously, evidently depend upon the brain, the physical, the nerves, the body. It goes without saying. Do you see what I'm saying? But the crucial point is this for the Buddhist approach. Your consciousness, your mind is the main thing. So, and by working on your mind, we've proven this with neuroscience, what do you call it? What do they call it? Plasticity. But there's this French monk who's well known. He's plugged his brain in, and he simply did some meditations on compassion, not even subtle concentration. And they could see that changed his brain. So that's the greatest finding of the 20th century, one scientist said. By simply thinking positive thoughts, it changes your brain. That is something that's new, that we have not only just discovered in the West the last 50-something years. So whatever your brain does impacts upon your mind, and whatever your mind does changes your brain. But the thing you work on, see, that's the thing in our culture. We think we got to go do some surgery on the brain. No, just change your mind and you fix your bloody brain. You get my point, Barbara? Excuse me, being Australian. It's not a very bad word in Australia, but we don't like. Maybe in America it sounds terrible. I don't know. Are you seeing my point, Barbara?
I do. I guess what I'm then thinking about is memory is part of the mind. Now,
memory is a state of mind. It's the capacity to remember. Well, first of all, short-term memory is the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. That's your mental state. Yes, but it clearly depends upon the bit of the brain that's connected to that working nicely. It's the same thing, darling. So this is the point, though.
So if I develop Alzheimer's,
yeah,
that affects obviously the memory. What happens with that memory in your brain or in your mind?
What do you mean? What happens to it? I don't understand your question. Ask it a different way.
So Alzheimer's affects memory, which is
Alzheimer's is one disease, one symptom of which is forgetting things. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. The ability to remember is called mindfulness. It's a state of mind, one of the many mechanics of our mind that is crucial to function. If you don't have proper mindfulness, you don't even know how to make a cake because you forget what you're doing moment by moment. So now the brain does its thing, and the bits of the brain that depend on that start not working, then your ability to remember won't be able to function. If your eyeball is not there, your eye consciousness can't function. If the part of your brain that is connected to your ability to, pay attention properly, or all these things, if that's not working properly, then you won't, all these diseases people talk about, ADHD or OCD, all these different words. That's your mind, that's your consciousness, but it's connected to the physical part of you. So by doing certain practices in Buddhism, the Buddhist approach, the Buddha's emphasis, Buddha's expertise is working on the states of mind. So if a person works properly doing these techniques, their brain might not be working properly, but like that French monk, by doing these techniques, you can change the brain. That's what they mean by neuroplasticity. You can change the brain. So, okay, if the disease is very severe, maybe the karma is so strong to have that lack of memory. No matter how hard that person tries, they won't be successful. Are you with me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Annabelle.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Laura. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
What about trauma? What about trauma that you can't remember?
What about it, darling? Ask me the question about it, a more kind of proactive question.
Yes. How do you deal with trauma that's way deep in your memory?
I know there's so give me let me just give me an example of something. Just say a simple example of something.
So maybe if you were abused as a child, but you can't really remember.
Right. Well, first of all, okay, yeah, exactly. So first of all, we can't remember most of today, Laura. Would you agree with that?
Definitely.
99% of today, we have no memory of it. It goes in one ear and out the other because we haven't trained our mind to recall things. We lose. But the interesting point is this, and this is probably what neuroscientists would say too, from the Buddhist perspective, every millisecond of whatever we've experienced, none of it goes astray. It's all stored in our memory. So we're talking not the brain here, but you can use the brain as you wish. But this is the Buddhist view. Nothing goes astray. Nothing goes astray. So eventually we do have the capacity, when we get single pointed concentration, we have, which means we've accessed this subtler level of consciousness that enables us to literally recall the past. And we're not just talking in Buddhism about the past when you're 2 years old. We're talking about 22 lives ago, because Buddha would say your mind comes from the past. So the theory is, yes, everything is stored in the mind, nothing goes astray. And then due to whatever conditions, certain things we can't recall. So we know very well, if we're a little girl and, you know, your daddy does something wicked to you, and so we have to think about this. When you're 2 years old and then daddy, or 4 years old, let's say, and daddy does something naughty, or the next door neighbor does something naughty, and then something is going to be happening in that little child's mind. So there's going to be, first of all, the Buddhist view is, in all of our minds, the most primordial delusion that runs all of us is this shock, is this very powerful emotional hunger to get only the nice things. So this is the most bare bones. So everybody's got that, Laura. This is the fundamental Buddhist model. Every being, we're all born with this primordial attachment, it's called, and its main function is this emotional hunger to get only the nice things. So when that mummy to that little 4-year-old girl, when she's kind to that 4-year-old girl, the little girl will smile. She'll be happy because her attachment just got the nice thing. Are you following me so far?
Yes.
So now let's say daddy does something wicked to her, then instantly what will arise, apart from anything else, instantly her attachment, her emotional hunger, which only wants nice things, will suddenly get a not nice thing. Daddy will whack her in the face, or daddy will do something naughty, let's just say, then that will arise the attachment. And then what will arise is the opposite of attachment, when attachment doesn't get the nice thing, and that's called aversion. Now, if depending on the little girl, she could be a very volatile little girl, and she might get angry and tell daddy to go away. Some little girls do that. Another little girl might be a good little girl and will feel guilty as well as angry, and will suffocate it because she feels this is wrong, and she will push it away, and she'll shove it purposely away. And then even an hour later, she will be smiling at mummy as if nothing had happened. Join the universe, Laura. This is how we spend our lives, baby. We've all got traumas. We've all got no memory of our traumas. And then one day, but you can't make it go away. Now, some little girls who are very direct and no nonsense will be very volatile, and they won't suppress it. And they might even deal with it because they've got a very intelligent mind, even at the age of 4. So that person won't have trauma, Laura. So we all have trauma because we've all got fears, we've all got attachment, we all have things happen that attachment doesn't want. Then we get aversion, then we add guilt to it, then we have shame, and then we have all this junk. So we've all got that. But what we do in our culture is remember the action. We try to remember what the person did, and then we get all focused on the person who did the harm. And then we don't realize that by working on our mind, we can change our response to that trauma, and literally it stops being a trauma. When you bring it up, you confront it, you remember it, you see it, you let go of it, and then it's gone. Theory, great theory, but this is what we're capable of, Laura. Are we communicating?
Okay. Yes, definitely.
And of course, it's hard work, darling. It's enormously hard. Some people have much worse things happen than other people. Some people live their lives being abused and tortured and harmed and raped. To the point where, a woman I know, she was like, since a tiny, I don't want to be gross to you people, but this is with the world, since a tiny child, her daddy would rape her. Then he'd bring all the neighbors in and they would rape her. And she'd even have the Alsatian dog raping her. She can't remember the hundreds, thousands of occasions. Her mother would abuse her. I'm trying to be blunt here, but these things happen. The father would be raping her, and then I don't want to be too gross, lived her life like this. So she managed to because she doesn't get angry, but she suffocated it all. And she had all these 47 different personalities living in La La Land in her desperate attempts to avoid dealing with these awful things. So that's our mind. Our mind is not capable sometimes of dealing with what we see and what happens. So we either go crazy, or we deny, or we get rage and anger, or if our minds are developed, Laura, and some people's minds are developed, they handle it. That's what's so fascinating. If you can, I mean, a person, I can think of this doesn't matter, so many examples, but it's possible that a person can have a mind that isn't very attached, that doesn't have much anger, but has a lot of suffering, but they're able to handle it, they're able to navigate it, they're able to work with it, and therefore go beyond it. And that's what we all have learned to do. We are all capable of that. That's what practice is, Laura.
Okay.
Are we communicating?
Yep.
But we need the courage to remember it because we're so terrified. We can't. So we either have denial, or we either blame and get angry, or we have guilt and depression, or guilt, or we have denial. There are 3 ways we manage, and we're not managing. All 3 are misconceptions. All we have to learn to, and this is what all our lives are, is even we practice now. Don't you see, in our culture, we think we have to keep going back into the past to unpack all the traumas. We don't need to. We start now by dealing with stuff that happens this second. So one person at work is mean to you. That could be, again, the habit to push it away, to pretend it didn't happen. So our practice is to see it, to confront it, to check, and this is the crucial point, to check in the mind what is arising. My attachment just didn't get what it wanted. So that's the part we have to look at, the mind, not the external. So as we keep dealing with the mind, moment by moment, our attachment, our aversion, our fears, our jealousy, working on the mind, that is what heals us. And then once we've worked on the mind, now we can work on the past. It happens naturally. It comes automatically.
Okay.
We feel in our culture, because we emphasize the external, we feel we have to sort of look for a needle in a haystack and find all these ancient memories. Don't have to. Start now, and it automatically goes backwards. Automatically, the past will reveal itself to us, and we will be able to handle, because we're working on our mind now. It's very powerful. It's a very different approach, a very different approach. And as long as, this is the point, even if we do remember the traumas, but as long as we keep having attachment and aversion and anger and blame or guilt or shame, we will never heal, ever, ever, ever. Healing is changing our mind. That's what healing is, Such a good point, Laura. Yes, Marka. Yes, Kasia, both of you. Marka, you have. Thank you. Please. Yes.
Hi. I'm interested to know more about the way that emotions or feelings play into this. I'd like to just give an example. So about 10 days or 2 weeks ago, I was just pissed off at everything. And everything I saw was bad. And I'm biking on my bike, and I'm pissed off at the exhaust coming out of the gas motors from the cars, and it's so hot because of the climate crisis, and I'm roasting away and I'm sweating because the fossil fuel companies are still.
Okay, so the question is what? But that's called anger, isn't it? What's the question? That's just called anger, isn't it?
So is that? So if I'm.
That's called anger.
Is that arising because of my thoughts about it instead of just sort of accepting?
I see your question is, what's the relation between emotions and thoughts? I think that's your question, right? This is a very fascinating discussion. This is unique to the Buddhist psychological model. So we need to think about this. When we first of all, the Buddhist view is the mind goes to these, like I've been talking to these our capacity for cognition is what our consciousness is. It goes to really subtle levels. And that's hard for us to even conceptualize what that even means, So basically it's this. We only notice what's happening in our mind, listen to this, when the physical body is showing the symptoms. So that's why a person, let's say, Maka, who's very quiet nature, who's got a very quiet nature, does not have volatile anger. That person, like you or me, is exactly the same. We all are driven by this intense emotional hunger to only get the nice things. That's called attachment. Then all of us have aversion when the attachment doesn't get what it wants. So if a very volatile type person, let's say, like in my case, my when I was a little girl, or as a big girl too, I'm still learning, that when my attachment didn't get what it wanted, the exhaust, whatever it might be, Maka, it could be the tiniest thing that would arise in the world that isn't what Robina's attachment wants, then that millisecond arising of anger, aversion, how dare, and depending on how deep your habit is, it'll be how strong that aversion will express itself as. And mine was volatile anger, shout, yell, kick. Okay, now a quieter person who doesn't have a kind of a volatile nature, but they still have attachment, and they will still have aversion when their attachment doesn't get what it wants, but they won't notice it because it doesn't manifest physically. It doesn't manifest by the words vomiting out the mouth and shouting and yelling. So that means they can't see their own mind. That's why people suppress all their lives. They don't realize they're suppressing their aversion, but they don't notice it, because the real point I'm saying is because we're so addicted to our body, to the physical, to the emotional, to the sounds coming out the mouth, the tears coming out of the eyes, the body shaking, the heart beating. That's what we mean by emotion. And we're thinking it's physical. No, it's just gross. It's all it is the habit in my mind. Basically, the Buddhist view, I've got in my mind the conceptual story called attachment. And if you give it words, attachment is saying, I want what I want every second. And then the second it doesn't happen, then aversion thought arises, which is, how dare that happen to me? That is wrong. How dare? That's what's happening, but at a very subtle level. And because I've practiced those conceptual stories for so long and come into this life completely habituated with the response of volatile anger, we don't make the connection between the volatile expression of shouting and yelling and in the mind this habitual thought of, how dare that happen to me? I don't want it. That's what's that thought is what underpins anger. The thought, I only want what I want every second, is what underpins attachment. So when we get concentration and you go beyond the grosser level, you unpack and unravel, get more and more subtle, that's when you start to hear these thousands of conceptual thoughts way deep down in our bones. And that's when we can really do the work of unpacking and unraveling them. So all emotions, the physical expression are just physical expressions because of the habit of our mind thinking certain things. So it's just like, when you first learn to play the piano, you've got the theory in your head, the thought, F, G major, this, a chord, you struggle and you've got the theory. But eventually, guess what? When you've practiced that music to perfection, the theories are completely just gone into your being, haven't they? And now you just automatically play the piano. Well, that's how it is with anger and jealousy and all the delusions. We've practiced them to perfection, so they just happen naturally, and we can't hear the theory, the thoughts that underpin them. That's why we've got to get concentration, and that's where the real work starts. So working on your anger just doesn't mean suppressing the feeling. It means unpacking and unraveling beneath that feeling and hearing the actual conceptual story of what anger is saying. And what anger is saying is, how dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. So that's all you were doing on the bike, baby. How dare this car do this? How dare, it's this outrage of this I not getting what it wants, is what anger is. But that thought is deep in our bones, and we've perfected it, and now we just express it automatically through our body and our senses. You with me? Maka, are you with me?
I'm with you. So I want to say, what's the antidote?
What the hell, Maka? You're a Buddhist. How many years have you been listening to these teachings? God in heaven. I'm not even going to answer you.
I know,
don't embarrass yourself.
Because I haven't been keeping up with my practice. So it was kind of an
obviously. Honey child, what's the antidote to anything? The bloody opposite is the antidote. Good Lord. Come on, babe. One step at a time. Anyway, excuse me, but you get my point. So Cassia, what's your point?
Oh, you might yell at me too, Robina. So
surprise. So be ready for it. Get yourself ready. Come on.
Well, so I'm grateful for the question that was just asked, because and the answer that you gave, Robina, because I do the same thing. I'm wondering about emotions when they feel very overwhelming.
That's how we spend our lives, right, Cassia? That's our trouble. Right. We're all overwhelmed because we haven't worked on the mind underneath it. But we've got to start somewhere. And that's why the first level of practice, and this is from Maka too, in Buddhism, is Control the servants of your mind, baby. Don't vomit out the words. Don't punch, don't kick, don't lie, don't steal. At least this is really long-term approach, you know. Control the servants, live in vows, get discipline.
Yeah.
Then you've got the luxury to go to the next level, and now you can start to unpack and unravel the thoughts that inform the emotions, that inform the body and speech. We're talking long-term here. This is Buddhist practice, babe.
So much of Western culture, I feel like, you know, even psychotherapy and stuff, it's so much about feelings and emotions. And so I work with young kids and we talk a lot about feelings and emotions. So maybe just to dumb it down for my level, you talk a lot about courage and having the courage. What's my question?
Stop, Cassia, stop for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, if you say Western psychology talks about feelings and emotions, then what do you think Buddhism's talking about if it's not feelings and emotions? I'm a bit confused by your question. So what do you think Buddhism is talking about if it's not feelings and emotions?
How can you develop more courage to dive into them?
Sweetheart,
Yeah.
the first thing is to have some confidence yourself that learning to investigate your own thoughts and feelings and emotions is the key to success, is the key to your happiness and your getting rid of suffering. So you've got to have some confidence in that theory first. So so far, so good? Okay. So whether you're dealing with your own or with others, so if it's a child, let's say, and they're screaming, first of all, the wisdom to help another, this is an interesting point, Cassia, your ability to help another is clearly dependent upon your ability to help yourself. So that's why the wisdom wing has got to come first. If you've got lots of anger and fears, and you suddenly have a kid expressing their anger and their fears, that's like a red rag to a bull for you. So you'll just have a panic attack and tell them to be quiet, or run away and have a heart attack. So the more you are able to know yourself and have kindness towards yourself and know these ancient habits, and as a way to go, baby, the more you have the courage to do that every second it's arising, then the more you're able to have another help another and hold their hand while their emotions are there. I mean, we're talking really intense stuff here. It's long term, Cassia. We've got so much junk buried. I mean, talk about trauma. We're all burying like crazy, trying to survive in daily life and put on a nice face for other people. But once we start the job, it's kind of scary, because we all know we start going to do some therapy. You know, you got your hands in, like a friend of mine said, you got your hands in your own shit. It's really nerve-wracking. So so that takes courage. But the crucial point is this: there's the event outside, whether it's the exhaust coming from the car or whether you're abusive boyfriend, that's the event outside. And try to see it this way. Try and remember that that's just the trigger. Then the other one is my response to it. So there are two things. One is the external and one is the internal. So when we have confidence that, yes, the external is real, the boyfriend did in fact punch me in the nose, you can't pretend it didn't happen. But then what can I do? If I can avoid the punch and get out of the way, that's a short term. If I can get away from the car with the exhaust, that's a short-term solution. But the final job is to work on whatever is arising in the mind that's been triggered by that external event. So as long as you have confidence in that theory, which is the Buddha's one, then we can just start. Slowly start. Give yourself good conditions. That's your daily practice. Have support, have friends, have a therapist, whatever you like, but that's the daily job. And keep having confidence that, yes, the external world is real. And right now, because we are very physical people, the external world totally dominates our lives. It pervades our mind, pervades our lives. When we have, even think of memories. When we have a memory of happiness, we describe the event. We wouldn't even know how to describe the happiness. We describe the event, which shows how powerful the external world is for us. That's why when we think of trauma, all we do is remember the person, remember the event. We don't even know how to articulate what's going on internally. That's our job. That's the job. So one step at a time, sweetheart. And be kind to ourselves, not brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Then you can help others, darling.
Yeah.
Then nothing that you see out there will disturb you. It's all grist for the mill. You'll be able to handle it, I tell you, and you'll be able to benefit others just by being kind, Cassia. That's like a miracle. You understand, darling? Good. Thank you so much. What else, dear people? I mean, this job that Buddha's talking about is no easy job, I tell you. But if we can understand theoretically and keep remembering it every day, a little bit every day, then we'll be successful. And then we delight in our success, delight in our progress, So what else, darling people? Talk to me. Anything else? 15 minutes. Yes, Victor. Hello, Victor. Did you put your hand up, Victor? You turned off again. Oh, you weren't there. Okay, fine. Okay, somebody else. Beth again. Go, sweetheart. Beth, dearest.
I had a really interesting situation a few weeks ago about finding out something about somebody that I work with that had a it was very shocking, severely abusive past, that they're still wanted in another state for convictions, and just totally shocking to me.
Okay,
and
so
I don't want to see that person. I have to see that person and pretend like I don't know.
Okay.
I don't want anger in my heart, and I still want to. It's very hard to sort that out, but I know that it's.
Hang on a second, Beth. Sorry. Let me just get clear. There's a person that you found out have done some heavy duty things. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So then have you got the book? I mean, there's different. Okay. So if you've got the Buddhist view of karma, you'll understand why they're doing it. And if you've got the Buddhist view of the mind, you'll know their mind. And then according to what's appropriate for you and your relationship with this person, you'll either keep distant, or if it's your son, then you'll stay close to him and try and protect him. So it's a question of how close this person is in your life and whether you need them in your life. So I mean, do you need this person in your life? Are they a close friend? Or are they just a colleague, or is it passing? What?
Co-worker. It's my manager.
Okay, so how come you found out about his past? He told you about it, or what?
I was triggered by some alarming behavior. He's an ex-cop, and I was triggered by, I don't know what he used the word triggered.
Don't just keep it simple, Beth. I need to know, how did you find out about his past? That's what I'm asking you, just that.
I Googled him, and
okay.
Yeah.
So how long has he been your boss?
3 years.
And has he behaved fairly nicely the last 3 years?
To me, yes.
Okay then, well then, honey child, one step at a time, Beth. Don't exaggerate. Everyone's got some past. Everybody's got something they've hidden. Everyone's done something naughty. But if for 3 years you've known this person and he's been pretty good to you, well then take him on face value. Don't make him your beloved friend unless you fall in love with him and you got some karma, and just leave it there. Don't exaggerate. So he's done some naughty things. Maybe he's changed. I mean, I know people in prison who've raped and murdered and terrorized and tortured. And I know them for 25 years, and I think they've done a really good job on working on their minds. Things aren't set in stone. So if this guy is pretending to be nice, he's really a psychopath, and you keep distant, or you leave the job. You just decide, darling. I don't know. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I just really want to guard my mind, and I still want to see him. I don't want to have a different.
Stop. What do you mean you want to see him? What do you mean by that? He's your boss, right?
Yeah, no, I don't want to see him in a different way. I really want to guard my mind.
No, it's not a question of seeing him in a different way. Like with me and my friends in prison on death row, for example, I know what they've done. They've told me, so I know their past, but I also know the person I've known now for 5, 7, 10, 15, 25 years. So I take it on face value. You don't have a fantasy about a person, that's all. So leave it there. You still continue to work there if he's been reasonable with you, and you leave it there. So you protect your mind. Yes, don't exaggerate and think, well, it's all just pretend. Factor that in. And think, well, if he's done a good job changing himself, I admire him, but don't exaggerate, and don't have to have a relationship other than simply being his employee or whatever, So yes, protect your mind. Excellent. But don't have fantasies. Don't kind of exaggerate one way or the other. Either he's a monster or he's a saint. Neither of these is true. You with me, Beth?
Yes.
If it's on the internet, everybody must know. It's all there available, and the man must be, he must know that people know. isn't it?
Yeah, it was just, I would say it was just an utter shock.
I understand that. I understand. I understand that. I understand, Beth. Interesting. Thank you. What else, folks? Any questions? Nothing. So,
Alona has a question.
good, Alona. Talk to me, sweetheart.
You have to unmute. There you go.
Hello, Venerable. Thank you for your teaching. I have a question. I understand about anger and my mind, and I understand that in my body and my mind interrelate with each other. I'm just trying to, maybe you can help me to unpack it. Like I have every month for 2 days, I have extreme anger in my mind. And I even ask people to stay away from me because I know it's nobody's fault. I know it's there. And my doctor would say it's your hormones, it's normal.
Right, exactly.
But as a Buddhist, I would like, I'm thinking that way, no, anger is not just in my head, it's in my mind. And maybe there's certain time in a month, I know something happened with my wind energies and it gets affects and triggers anger.
Okay, whether you use
Am I thinking right?
Alona, whether you use the Tibetan medical interpretation or the Western medical interpretation, in either case, yes, the Western one would say it's your hormones. So that's your physical, and that impacts upon your mind. So if you take the Tibetan medical system, because at a certain point, the wind energies in the subtle channels of the body, the 72,000 subtle channels, our subtle physical body, through which courses all the different wind energies linked to our different states of mind. And at a certain point, the wind energies shift, and that impacts upon the mind, and that activates your aversion because your attachments you're very sensitive. So that's just the way it is. So then you just have to, knowing eventually when you're really advanced, you could control it. But in the beginning, if you can't, it's like if you go out in the weather and the sun is so hot, it makes you faint. You've got to just accept that and know that, so you protect yourself. So then but still, it doesn't mean you can't work on your mind. As long as you don't just say, oh, it's only my hormones, I can't help it. You still be cautious, but you can still work on your mind. You can still help yourself work on your mind, and do your best to protect yourself. Yeah.
At this time, I can just try to protect others because it's so intense.
You've got to protect yourself first, because you don't want to put imprints in your mind of anger for your own sake. And then on the basis of that, you have compassion and protect others. It's got to be you first.
It feels like I can't, it's so intense and big. It just
What, darling?
Just want to, it feels so overwhelming for those 2 days. It's just so big and intense. I just want to hide away and just wait for this to pass through me.
That's a sensible thing. I mean, if you get so burned in the sun, maybe you've got to hide away in the shade. Be reasonable with yourself, Alona. Be reasonable with yourself. Be practical. Be reasonable. Protect yourself, and then indeed protect others. But don't just have resistance. But when you have this experience happen, learn also to be aware of, conscious, and notice your mind, and just, yes, make it like a little retreat time for yourself to see your mind. But don't be angry about being angry, because that's often what happens. You then set it in stone and make it like a big lump. Just be very fluid with it and observe your mind, and be very cautious and careful with yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, and after a while, after a few days, after when it passed, it becomes very happy. A few days, I feel like I'm like a bipolar sometimes, but I don't share that information.
You are. Bipolar is lots of attachment 1 minute and lots of aversion the next, up and down like a yo-yo. So join the universe. I'm not being sarcastic. I say we're all bipolar. It's a question of degree, and don't be insulted by that, people. We get very offended when I say that. But that's the Buddhist model. When attachment is completely berserk, we go up and everything's all exciting and gorgeous. And when things go wrong, we go crashing down. That's the way we are, Alona. So the key one is to learn to navigate that period, attempting to keep your mind stable. That's what, attempt to keep yourself stable. It's like when the wind blows very strongly, you've got to work extra effort to keep yourself upright. So you just have to not just sink into it and not just wait for it to go away. That's blindness. You've got to learn to be conscious, learn in that period. So make it an internal time, make it a time when it's just you observing the crazy energy, observing the awareness, and kind of navigate it and not buy into it, and say mantras and protect yourself. Don't make it just, don't think, well, it's negative, I've got to be negative. No, not like that. Be wise.
Thank you. I'll practice to navigate that. I didn't
Good.
know I can navigate. Thank you.
Of course you can. Come on. Of course you can, darling. What else, people? We have 4 minutes to go in our little hour together. I think we covered so much as usual. We did cover a lot. Yes, Laura. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Hey, I would like to rescue Maka's question about how to practice, because
Yes.
I am not a Buddhist. And
Okay, darling. I hear you, Laura. Thank you. Thank you, sweetheart. So this is where it's, so then why don't you ask a specific question, Laura? Is it more about anger or fear or depression or jealousy? One of the unhappy emotions. How would you express? What would you say?
Anger.
Okay. So anger, so this is the Buddhist analysis. I'll just say it briefly, and you've been hearing me. This is and these are very deep inside us, very instinctive, very automatic. You don't learn it from your mother. You know, they're very deeply inside us. We're kind of born like this. So the one that the deepest of these neuroses that drives us, like I've been saying, and it's so primordial, it's so automatic that actually we don't hear it being articulate. It's just an assumption. The deepest drive in us is this assumption. And it's a neurotic one, a fear-based one, that somehow I must get what I want every second. I must get only the nice things. That's the attachment. You kind of hear my words. Attachment is a very powerful word in Buddhism. It's this deep it's like an emotional hunger, a neediness for everything to be lovely. You get my point, Laura? So as long as in your day, as long as all the nice things happen, the weather's nice and the food is nice and mummy was nice and the boyfriend was nice, and even the feelings in the body are nice, then attachment is getting what it wants. And what that brings is a feeling of pleasure. So we all want that. But because we're so fragile, the moment your attachment doesn't get what you want, the more strong the attachment is, that when it doesn't get what it wants, then aversion will arise, irritation, annoyance, frustration, and a volatile expression of that is anger. And you'll smash and kick or just get annoyed. You know, that's called aversion. So watching these like a hawk, and these are 1,000 times a day, Laura, it's really quite subtle. And our trouble is we only tend to notice it when it's very volatile. That's a bit late, you know? So the idea is just to sort of be watching your mind as much as you can throughout the day, and you're just checking your responses to things. So aversion is the bare bones state of mind that is what informs what we call anger. Anger is a volatile expression of it. So these are the two. If we could understand these two, and we're running between these two like 1,000 times a day, like I said, and it's really quite subtle, when we can learn to work with these and catch them. So when the thing that happens, like a loud noise comes and you find you get annoyed straight away, that's called aversion. Oh, shut up, Laura, give it a break. It's okay. It's just a noise. You counteract it before it becomes too strong. And you do like this all the time, every day, then you're learning to navigate it and argue with it and notice it and be conscious and go against it. Apply the antidote. So the antidote to being annoyed with something is, even if it's just a noise, and don't wait till it's a severe thing. Oh, give it a break, Laura. It's only just a noise. You just drop the cup when you're washing the dishes. You get annoyed. The traffic in front of you is too slow. You get annoyed. They're mild versions of anger. Use those opportunities. Don't wait for the heavy things to happen. And you simply argue with yourself. And it mightn't go away immediately, but be conscious. Notice you just got annoyed. Oh, give it a break, Laura. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It'll change. It's okay. So if you counteract it, like you're talking to yourself. You get my point, Laura? That's really, at a very simple level, what daily practice is, as much as we can. And we get better and better and better at that. But instead of that, what happens is you get annoyed at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then you start getting upset and you feel yourself getting irritated. And by 10 o'clock, you want to kill somebody because we're not being conscious of it. We don't work on it. Then we keep building it. So we're sort of dragged from pillar to post by external events, not thinking we have any control over it. Do you understand, Laura?
Yeah.
That's practice.
I do.
Good.
Okay.
A good end point. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Well, everybody,
Thanks.
look, kind of like a dream, 1 whole hour. My church clocks have just told me it's 11 o'clock. St. Francis across the road. Luckily, the church, I'm on the side of the church. The clock faces that way, so it's not quite as direct, you know. And I've got these adobe walls about that fat, so when I close the window, I can't hear a thing. It's the advantage of having this old building I'm living in. Okay, darlings, much love. But just think how delightful. And one more day, one more thinking, one more listening, analyzing, checking, having confidence that we have got this marvelous potential to be stable, not attached, not angry, not jealous, not depressed, full of love and kindness and wisdom. That's our potential. Just kind of taste it. Look forward to it, enjoy it, and see what we've done so far. Don't always keep looking forward, but learn to see what we're practicing even now, and rejoice in our practice. Delight. Don't always just point out the faults. Point out our efforts. This is so important. Okay, sweethearts.
Thank you,
See you.
Venerable.